sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Dansha. How are you?
I'm good, sir.
Right, shall we start?
Yes.
Right. So we are on this long subject of responsibility center still, but it's combined with the budgets because in P2, what we need is lot on the budgets, responsibility centers. When it comes for the case study also, these things will be very useful. So we were looking at rolling budgets last time. Why we need a rolling budget? Rolling budget is something what we call a continuous budget, where you have always 12 months or whatever the period, the entire budget period is ahead of you. You don't wait till the 12 months is gone to prepare the new budget. Always you take 1 month off or 3 months off and add 1 month or 3 months. So continuously you have a period ahead of you. So that way it will remove the uncertainty with the people because they know for next 12 months they can always plan ahead. Now government budget, for example, they prepare the budget from January to December. The finance minister will present the budget in November 2017 for 2018. So people will have to wait till November to know what they can do in January. That's the problem. You can't plan anything. So when the finance minister says, yes, you can go ahead in November, only they have to plan for January 2018. But with the rolling budgets, it won't happen. At any time today, the people who have in a rolling budget will know next 12 months ahead what they are planned. In May, they will know next 12 months ahead what their plans are. So it's a gateway to deal with uncertainty, right? Because you can update the budget all the time. So any uncertainty, any new things that is coming up will be completely incorporated into the budget. So you are not working with old figures, old data. You're always updating. Particularly with these changes in inflation, interest rates, all that, I think the rolling budget is a very, very useful one. If you remember in Sri Lanka just a couple of days back, the governor of the central bank suddenly decided to increase the interest rate. So with that, all your plans, we need to revise it. So this kind of a budget will help in that kind of a thing. So you don't have a outdated budget or the variances coming out. It will just give a plan for the future with more realistic numbers. So that way the plan will be more reasonable and more achievable. But as with anything, there are advantages, there are disadvantages. Surely it will reduce the uncertainty. Surely it can be used for cash management, and I mean it's almost compulsory for cash management purposes. You must have a rolling continuous cash forecast. You can't wait till end of December and say we are just preparing for January to December next year, and suddenly you find January we don't have any money to pay the salary. You must continuously have a 12 months ahead. So you can always plan. If you know that in April you don't have money for salaries, you can go to the bank in advance and arrange overdraft for April. Right? So it will always force the managers to look ahead continuously. Now in government budgets, I remember a long time back when last time when the earlier government is in the present people were in power, Ravi Karnanayaka was talking to me about introducing continuous budgeting. And because that way you will force the managers to look ahead continuously, particularly the government departments, government project planners, etc. Otherwise they will wait till November or August and only they will think about the next year's plan. But here you are under pressure all the time to think of next 12 months, next 12 months, next 12 months. So that brings lot of stress, lot of strain on the people, but that's a good way to get the managers groomed for the future. And it gives more realistic comparisons because it's not just giving you some variances, because the variances are all useless in a way. It's something what has happened in the past. What can we do now? I mean, of course, with the variances, we can do something for the future. But it's much more important than rather than looking at variances to update the budget so you know exactly where you are moving. And if you know that you are not moving in the right direction, you may be able to do certain things. You may be able to think of adding new people, reducing people, adding new channels of sales or whatever it may be. You are proactive all the time with the disadvantages, of course, very time consuming. I remember I was working in a company. Every time when I ask some people what are they doing, they say they are preparing the budget. I ask why? No, because we have to do a continuous budget. So all the time they are doing budgets, no other work. So this was the danger. I told Ravi at one time, if we introduce in governments the role in budget, the people who are doing this kind of work will be continuously doing budgets and they will not have anything else to do. They will be always living in the future but not in the present. That's a dangerous thing. So you must have smart people who can live in the present and also look at the future. But in our setups, it may not happen. Difficulty of communication of changes all the time. Now that's a big problem for we, the finance people. Today we say your budget for August is so much, and tomorrow when we do the budget, say in May when we do the budget, we say August budget is changed, August budget is going to be something like that. People get very upset, people get really crazy, and they think sometimes we are crazy, but it's not so. But that makes sometimes because the people are not very clear to understand the purpose of this role in budgets, continuous budget. So to a great extent, sometimes the people can get upset over their attitudes because they are generally their minds are set on a particular target, particular achievement, and suddenly when the finance manager says your budgets are changed and it's going to be so much, they get very upset and they are unable to adopt to the plan. So there can be a lot of dysfunctional behavior arising from that one. Give me a second. Anusha.
Yes. Yes.
These are the advantages, disadvantages. So this is very useful, particularly in the OT questions and also in the case study. Sometimes they will ask you to vote for role in budget. So you must know the advantages and disadvantages. So there are the ways for budgeting. So this is very important slide. There are 3 ways we can approach for budgeting. Normally what we use is what we call incremental budgeting. So what we do is we look at the last year's budget and then we go and adjust the figures here and there and increase the thing. So I was preparing our church budget for next year for the entire Methodist Church, and we were looking at the last year's figures. So the people who have spent money, they were, say, if they have spent on telephones big money last year, with another 10% increase, they get another big money. So in a way, some people were arguing with me yesterday saying, you are very unfair because the people who have spent a lot will get more money. The people who have been very conscious of the cost and saving money, spending little on the telephone, will get little for the next year's budget. That is a problem with incremental budget. It does not attract you to save money. Because I remember when I was in the government sector, when we prepare the budget, we look at, okay, how much they have spent last year? Okay, 40 million. Make it 42 million. So a person who has spent more money will get another 2 million increase. But a person who has saved money 30 million, he will be given only 31.5 million. So there is no incentive for people to save when we go with incremental budgeting. So that's one problem with incremental budgeting. What do you know about zero-based budgeting, Danusha? What is it? Hmm?
Zero-based budgeting, you base zero as the start.
Yeah.
And I mean on like
Basically,
based on
you assume there is no budget for the previous. Understand? So every year you are thinking new. So you don't look at the last year cost and increase by 5%. You think last year cost was 0. So you have to justify why you want so much of money for stationery. You can't say last year we spent stationery 200,000 and give us 210,000. No. Last year we assume that you did not spend anything. So justify from the scratch. That is what zero-based budgeting is. So again, I remember when the present Prime Minister was the Prime Minister in 2004, he told me, can we introduce zero-based budgeting? It's a good thing. It makes people to think. Because today, if you look at these government sector organizations, even including the private sector, there are people for the sake of having people. They don't know what they have to do even. They don't have a job to do even. But they have been there for last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and they continue to stay. So, in zero-based budgeting, that won't happen. You have to justify why do you need these old stenographers? Because nowadays you don't need stenographers. But in most of the government sector, still you have stenographers. But most of the buses, they do their own emails. So you don't need a person to take shorthand, type in and do the typing and send you a draft and all that kind of a thing. So why do you need this kind of people? So it opens your mind, it opens your thinking to see why we need. For example, the person might ask, why do you need 4 legs for a chair? Right? Can't you do with 3 legs? This is how the 3-leg chairs have come. Can't you do with 1 leg? Kind of a thing. So all the time the people are made to think. That is what zero-based budgeting is. You assume, even though you have a budget, not that you don't have a budget, but you assume there is no budget. So everything you have to start from scratch. So government, very good to introduce this one, but I think some other governments like Singapore, they have introduced it. But country like us, which will take another 100 years to introduce that kind of a thing, because our people are not adaptable for changes, that kind of a thing. So we still go by incremental budgeting. We look at the previous budget, add 5%, deduct 10%, cut 10%, like that we go on. But that's not the right way. Actually, not that I say it's not the right way. It is mostly practiced, but I believe if you can go into zero-based budgeting, it is a much more better budgeting way. It gives you some kind of a deep analysis of your cost behavior, deep analysis of your thinking. The next one, the third one, is something which is new to all of us, what we call ABB, activity-based budgeting. Now, normally budgets are prepared in your own company, maybe. For the finance division, there's a budget. For claims division, there's a budget. For selling division, there's a budget. Like that, they will prepare the budget. But when you say activity-based budgeting, just like what we learned in the earlier slides about the activities, we budget for the activities, not for the function. We budget for the activity of our operation, surgery. We budget for the activity of receiving inventory. We budget for the activity of preparing the invoices. So we don't go by finance, this kind of a budget. We looked at the budget activity because it is coming from the activity-based costing. We know the costs are driven by the activities. So we try to budget for the activities. So that's a kind of a new development, but you will agree with me. To do that, we must have activity-based costing in setup. If you don't have activity-based costing, you can't do activity-based budget. Let's look at the incremental budgeting. Basically, it look at the previous year budget and then adjust it for a little bit of inflation and maybe other cost increases. So that's what we do. Looking at the previous year budget and we go on doing it. And there may be certain specific items. Maybe you have bought a new machine. So last year that machine was not there. So this year we have a new machine. So maybe additional depreciation. Last year you did not have this particular department, but this year we have a particular department. So additional workforce for the particular department. All those things will be included. But based on the previous year budget, we will have the new budget. So generally, in a static environment where the things are not changing too much, this is the ideal way to do the budget. So in short questions, you might say they might say the environment is very static, stable, less inflation, something. In that kind of a thing, this budgeting is all right, because it's basically just a little bit of inflation you need to adjust it, it's all right. When the things are rapidly changing, incremental budgeting may not be the right way. So small adjustments are made. That's what we call incremental budgeting. Obviously, advantages, disadvantages, very simple. You only have to take the last year budget. In Excel worksheet, you can just work out your figures here and there. That's what I did for my church yesterday, and prepared the budget and presented, but the people were fighting with me, saying the people who have spent more money, they are getting more money. The people who have been very conscious of the offerings and people who have been saving money, they have got little money, which is true. Cheap, you don't need too much of workforce to do. In few hours, few days, you can just prepare the Excel worksheet and prepare the budget. Very suitable in stable environments, and it's a very still, I believe, it's the most practical way to prepare the budgets. The government budget is simply based on incremental budgeting. The government budgets, for example, Sri Lanka, they start somewhere in July for next year. So they look at the budget for this year. They still don't have all the actuals, maybe 6 months actuals they will have it. So they will look at and increase the budget according to whatever they feel. Disadvantages, it is surely backward looking. It's not forward looking. You look at the previous budget and do it. You are not thinking something new. You are looking all the time the past, the history. So any inefficiencies in the previous budget, if you have spent very much on stationery or something like that, you will give more inefficiency because you had a 10% more inefficiency. You are not challenging them, you are just giving them. So yesterday we were discussing with the president of the church the budget, and we found some people, not that they were sick, but just because the 31st March was coming, they saw some medical balance available, and everyone has gone to the eye clinic to get their eyes tested. Absurd. But that is the way people do. People respond to this incremental budgeting. They think the budget is a pot of cash to be spent, so they want to spend it. I remember when I was working in the water board, all the time, when it comes for the November, they ask me, Kumar, how much money is available in my budget? So when I say it is available so much, you know what they do? They go and buy carpets, they go and buy curtains just to spend the money. Because they know if they spend the money, next year they will get another 10% increase also. If they don't spend money, they will get less money. So this is a very, very bad way for an institution to manage, governments to manage, but this is what is happening. It is based on, it is building upon previous inefficiency. It doesn't attack the waste, it doesn't attack the inefficiency. It always try to do on the same thing. So it's like these governments, when the governments of Sri Lanka, particularly when they come into power, they look at the last government's corruption and they want to do better than them. In the sense, better in the sense not in the good way, but in the bad way. So they wasted 10 million, let's us waste 11 million. That's the kind of a thing, because that's the way this budgeting is helping them to promote inefficiency, corruption. Not at all suitable for a change in environment, because you can't go by the previous budget when the things are changing very much. Sometimes it becomes a very easy target. You are given another 10% increase in your cost budget, so you can manage it. So there is no challenge for you to save any money. Activities not justified. Just all same activities continue for another year and another year and another year. You are not challenged to see why you are carrying out that same old activity. You have already a new computer system, but you have a man to write manual checks. Why don't you put the checks onto the computer system? So this kind of a thing which happens all the time encourages overspending because there is no room or no attraction for you to save money. You go on spending. You want to somehow finish the budget. That's what the advantages and disadvantages. You can see more disadvantages than advantages. This is kind of a latest new budget. As I said, this is where all activities, what we call decision packages, are re-evaluated every year, taken as scratch, as if there is no budget. Every activity needs to be justified. So you assume that there is no function, no finance function. You assume there is no sales function, even though there is a sales function. So you must justify why your company needs Dhanusha. Just because she was there last year, it does not mean that we should keep her. They must justify what is the purpose of having Dhanusha, what contribution Dhanusha is making to the company. This is why the banks are very, very focused on this kind of a thing. Every year they will review it and see, is this person okay for us? Or is this person contributing? No. What? Last year he may have been a good contributor, but it does not mean that he is going to be a contributor for the next year. We have changed our system. This is what we see with our cricket teams nowadays. Just because we have played in the 50-over match very well, you are not included in the T20 team because you have to justify his place in the T20 team. This is basically you are looking at something like zero base. You don't look at the past, you don't look at what they have done, but you try to justify his presence, the expenditure on a new base. So basically, increments are compared with incremental benefits, okay? You need additional 2 members of staff, okay? But what is the benefit they are going to bring? They are going to cost us 100,000. What's the benefit they will give? So all the time you have to justify. It's very stressful on the management, on the managers. Sometimes they really get annoyed when you go for zero-based budgeting and when you ask them to justify, they don't have a justification and they really go crazy and they go mad over the finance people. But that's the right way to do. So it's a radical alternative to incremental budget. I mean, basically you think there is no budget and you have to justify everything. Why you need a computer? Just because you had a computer last year, it does not mean. Just because you had a laptop last year, it does not mean you need a laptop this year. Why do you need a laptop? Kind of a thing. So you start from scratch. You don't start from the previous budget, start from scratch. And every manager will have to justify the expenditure, and because your resources are limited, you will see who has justified the best and the allocations will be given to the best people who have justified. Others will rank below. Some may not have any budget allocation for their activity. So this is what the Prime Minister was trying to do. Even the Prime Minister is trying to do just now, this kind of a thing. With the government money available, he wants people to, the ministers to come and justify why they need. Just because they got $2 billion last year, not necessarily they are going to get 2.2 billion. They must justify this year from the $1, the first dollar to the 3 billion what they require. So everyone will have to justify. And after that, the government will, the finance minister will see the total money available and they will give the allocation to the best justified people. And the others, they may not get anything or they may get very little. So, always you have to think alternate ways of doing it. Why do we want to spend money for this? Can't we do like this? Why do you want to spend money on advertising? Right? Can't we do without TV advertisement? Why do you want people to come on Saturdays and work. Can't we do without Saturday work? So like that, everything we have to look at alternative way of doing things and see that it can be just. So in essential, every cost, every activity is identified and eliminated by removing from the next year's budget. If you can't justify, sorry.com, you don't get any money. You are eliminated. So if the government decides on this basis, I suppose the Sri Lankan government can save lot of money, because the ministers, the cabinet themselves will have to justify why they need so many people in the cabinet. Unfortunately, these things will not work in a country like ours. This is working very well. Every person needs to justify their existence. So, advantage and disadvantage of zero-based budgeting. Surely, it creates a kind of a challenging environment. It accepts the changes in the environment. You respond to the changes. You don't look at the last figure. You go on responding to the changes. You are very much focused on your goals. The resources are allocated based on your goals and objectives. Very much forward looking. You don't have a past to look back. You have to look forward and see what you are going to do with the budget. It gives a very good control over resources. So it puts the resources into the right slots, right allocations. Surely a very good performance measure. So in the responsibility center, if we can have the zero-based budget, you can measure the performance much more positively, and also focuses managers to examine their activity. They can't just take it for granted just because the activity is there for last 10 years, we are going to have it for the 11th year. We have to justify, and it's going to be forward to. Surely the disadvantage is very, very time consuming. Not easy to put the zero-based budgeting into practice, because everything needs to be justified, and that takes a lot of time. Very expensive activity to do. It encourages short term. It encourages the short term, because basically you are looking for next 1 year only. You are not looking for very long term. So generally it may be in conflict with your long term goal. It requires new budgeting skills. This is one big problem Sri Lanka has. Many of our people are not taught, they are not given the proper education on this kind of a thing, and therefore it requires lot of budgeting skills and can result in arbitrary decision. The budget is a forecast future plan. So for example, one minister might be very, very smart enough. He will put up saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to put up, give water, I'm going to do this, that and the other, and get a big budget for him. And maybe the people will give a big budget for him. The person, the minister who could not speak that very well, who could not present very well, but who is a good worker, may not get any budget allocation. And finally, you might find that we have done a wrong allocation, because it's going by not by the past, it's going by the future. So one minister will come and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and he will get a big allocation. And the minister who could not speak may not get a big allocation. It all happens in the companies also. Some managers, they are very smart fellows. They know how to talk around and tell the CEO, I'm going to do this, I want this, and then he might get many cars, all the things to him. Finally, he may not deliver anything. The other man who is prepared to deliver, but who could not, communicate it properly, may not get money. So sometimes I see this in the present cabinet ministers. Some ministers are very good in their work, but they don't have the skills or to present it before the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister, the way to present it. So sometimes they are good projects may just get out. But some man who is not really a good manager, who is a damager almost, but who is really good in talking, presenting, all that, might get a wrong allocation. So this is the disadvantage of zero-based budgeting. Now we come to the third one, activity-based budgeting. So for you to have activity-based budgeting, you must have activity-based costing. So basically you budget for the activity. You don't look at the function, you budget for the activity. Every activity must be budgeted. For a kidney transplant, what are the needs? So how many hours of theatre operation? How many nurses are required? So all that activities need to be budgeted, and that is what we will put it as a budget. So you will see the cost driver and all that and work it through activity based. So that's what activity based budgeting is all about. Zero based budgeting works on zero based packages, whereas activity based budgets works on activities all the time. So cost driver need to be identified, and based on the cost driver we have to decide, okay, this activity is going to cost so much. Then you will decide, is it worthwhile to do it? What is the benefit is it bringing? Shall we stop it? What happens if we stop it? These are all the decisions we will look at. So it is basically the cost driver and the budget period. The advantage and disadvantage here, as I said, activity-based costing becomes very relevant when the overheads are big, when the overheads are significant. So activity-based budgeting can become really relevant where the overheads are big. Good control of the cost, because we know the behavior of the cost very well. So we can apply our cost control techniques to the very definite activity, very definite cost. It gives lot of good management information. Surely it is arising from the activity-based costing. We know the activity which is costing us more, why it is so, can we reduce it? So it gives very good management information, very good for total quality management environments, because in total quality management we are focused on activity. We are not bothered about the functions. We want the final activity to happen. So to that extent, it is very good. Disadvantages, very expensive again, just like zero-based budgeting. Only it can be applied in an activity-based costing environment. So I think in the paper yesterday or day before day, there was a question on this area. They say a company that is doing absorption costing system, they want to introduce the ABB, whether it can be implemented, yes or no. It cannot be, because unless you have activity-based costing, you can't implement ABB in an absorption costing environment. These are the questions that may come up, so you have to read the questions carefully, answer the question.
Sir?
Yeah, Dhanusha.
Can you explain that again? When there is absorption-based costing, we can use ABB, no?
We cannot use ABB because absorption costing means we don't have activities. Absorption costing goes on machine hours or labor hours or something like that. We are not.
So that you mean if the traditional method is used, we can't use.
You can't use exactly. Yeah. I mean, what I meant by absorption costing is traditional method. Okay. Yeah, right. So because activity-based costing is also a form of absorption costing, but it is when you say traditional costing, it is going on overheads are apportioned on basis of machine hours or labor hours or something like that. So no activities, no cost drivers. So there you can't use activity-based budgeting. Understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
This was the question I think in the day before yesterday. One of the students who sat for the paper had this question. So when you prepare the budget, now all of us, we talk about the budgets, the governments are talking, churches are talking, even the homes are talking about budget. Everyone has some kind of a budget. So any organization, what is an organization? Organization is a set of people grouping together to achieve a common objective. So basically organizations are there to achieve, to achieve certain achievements or certain targets. So all those targets in the responsibility center, we try to give it with some measurable performance. So generally the three measurable performance are profitability, liquidity, assets turnover. Profitability, liquidity, assets turnover. So profitability is simply to see the profit to sales, or what we call profit margin or operating margin. So we take the profit before interest and tax over sales, and then we can say how much is the margin. So when we say we are getting 10% operating margin, what it says is that for every $100 of sales, we are getting a $10 profit, right? So always you must hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry, my power went off here, so I had to get the mobile connection. So it's all right now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. So basically, we look at our responsibility centers in terms of three matrices. One is what we call profitability, one is what we call liquidity, the other one is what we call asset turnover. So first of all, we are going to talk about what is called profitability, right? Profitability. Profitability is simply the profit over sales ratio. So when we say 10% operating margin, what does it mean? Tells us the ratio is calculated profit for interest and tax, profit before interest and tax divided by the sales figure. So profit before interest and tax, let's assume it is $10, and if the sales is $100, or let's put it like this, profit before interest and tax 100,000. Let's assume revenue is 1 million. So your operating margin is 100,000 over 1 million, which will give us 10%. What does this say? When you say your operating margin is 10% or profit margin is 10%, what does it say? It basically tells us for every $100 of sales, we get a $10 profit, right? So let's assume there's another company which has 15% profit margin. Which is better, company A or company B? Company A has 10%, company B has 15%. What is better? Company A 10% profit margin, company B 15% profit margin. Which company is better?
15%.
15% is better. Why? Why is it better? Because the company A 10% profit margin means they are spending 90% on expenses, isn't it? Right? They are spending 90% on expenditure. Second company, they are spending 15% profit margin. That means they are spending only 85% on expenditure. You can see the profit margin straight away tell us that second company is doing better cost control. This is what you need to understand. The profit margin is telling us who is doing better cost control. And what is the purpose of the budget? Budget is to ensure that we manage our cost very well. So for that purpose, it's good always to have a higher profit margin. Higher profit margin means you are spending less on cost. That means you are managing your cost better. So this is one of the purpose of the budget. Second one is what we call liquidity. What is liquidity? You know, companies can make profits, but companies may run bankrupt because you don't have enough money to pay your suppliers, you don't have enough money to pay your salaries, you don't have enough money to pay your electricity bill, water bill. You might have all the assets. You have big assets all over, but you don't have money. I was working in a company, they had millions of money invested in inventory, lot of inventory. But at the end of the month, no money to pay the salary. Big profits also. So I was fighting with the director saying, why are you bringing all this inventory and stocking? You are not having money to pay the salaries. You don't have money to pay the bank loans. You don't have money to pay the taxes, and everything was in a crisis. So you must manage the budget in such a way that you have proper liquidity. So the liquidity is measured in most of the time by something what we call current assets to current liability. Let's assume this company has current assets of 100,000, current liabilities of 50,000. We say the liquidity ratio is 2:1. What do you mean by 2:1? That for every $2 of current assets, they have only $1 of current liability. So they are fairly comfortable. Even if all the suppliers come and ask for money, they can pay. Because for every $2, for every $1 of current liability, they have $2 of current assets. But what happens if liquidity ratio is only 0.5? That means for every $1 of liability, we have only $0.50 of assets, which is bad. We might have big fixed assets, we might have big non-current assets, but we don't have enough money to go through the day-to-day. So that's another area the budgets must be very carefully looking at. Today, it is very important. We might prepare profit budgets, but if we don't manage our liquidity very well, we will have problems. Then the other one is what we call asset turnover. What is asset turnover? Asset turnover. So that is simply we want to see your return on capital employed, or you work out on your assets, right? Because you're basically you have assets to earn money. We want to see the way that you have got revenue divided by assets. Revenue divided by total assets or the assets employed. So let's assume that our revenue is 10 million. and our assets are 5 million. So we have asset turnover ratio of 2. In over 5, we have asset turnover ratio of 2. So this company, what it says is basically, it says that for every $1 of assets, we are getting $2 of revenue. That is what it means. Every $1 of assets, we are getting $2 of revenue. And another company, let's assume the asset turnover ratio is 3. What company is better? 2 or 3? Which company is better? For every $1 of assets, first company is earning $2 of revenue, second company is earning $3 of revenue. Which is better?
The second company.
Second company is better, isn't it? Second company is better.
Yeah.
But why do we say it is better? Because we invest our money on assets to earn revenue. So the second company has invested on better assets, and therefore they can get a $3 revenue, right? Whereas the other company is getting only $2. So the asset turnover ratio tells us how good we are in employing our assets, how good we have invested our money in our assets. The first ratio, the profit margin ratio, says how good we are in managing our cost. So now I want to show you something different now. Not something different. I want to show you something, maybe you have known this one. So let's look at the ratios I was talking about. Right? First of all, before I move into that one, let's talk about return on capital employed. We discussed this one, return on capital employed. What is return on capital employed? Return on capital employed is profit before interest and tax divided by capital employed or total assets. So, say let's assume the profit before interest and tax is 100,000. And capital employed, let's assume 500,000. As a percentage, it is 20%. Now, what does this telling us? This is telling us for every $1 of capital that we employ, we are getting a profit of $20. Right? We are getting a profit of $20. I want you to mark this ratio as ratio number 1. Now I come to the earlier ratio what I mentioned, the operating profit. Operating margin. I said profit before interest and tax divided by revenue as a percentage. As a percent. Profit before interest and tax is 100,000. Let's assume the revenue is 1 million. As a percentage, it is 10%. So what it says is that for every $100 of revenue, I get a profit of $10. For every $100 of revenue, I get a profit of $10. So this is my ratio number 2. Now I want to look at other ratio which we learned just now, asset turnover ratio. Asset turnover ratio. It is revenue divided by capital employed. Normally it is not given as a percentage, it is given as a ratio. So in this case, revenue is 1 million. Capital employed is 500,000. So the ratio is given as 2. So what it means is for every $1 of capital employed, the revenue what we generate is $2, which is the $3 company is better than the $2 company. 10%, 15% company is better than the 10%. But I want to look at the three ratios relationship. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to take the ratio number 2. Ratio number 2 is what? Profit before interest and tax divided by capital employed. That is my ratio number 2. I'm going to multiply the ratio number 2 with ratio number 3. Ratio number 3. Ratio number 3 is what? Revenue, profit before, profit before interest and tax. Operating margin is profit before interest and tax. Now the ratio number 2 is profit before interest and tax divided by revenue. Second one, the third ratio is, I'm going to multiply with that revenue divided by capital employed. So what I did was I took the ratio number 2 and ratio number 3. So if I multiply, what will happen? What is my balance in ratio? Revenue to revenue will get cancelled off. What will I get? Profit for interest and tax divided by capital employed. What is that? Look at 1, 2, 3 and tell me. That is ratio number 1, isn't it? That is ratio number 1. Can you see? ROC is made up of two ratios. ROC is equivalent to asset turnover times profit margin or the operating margin. And this is what we saw. Asset turnover was 2%, profit margin was 10%. That will give us 20% ROC. The top formula what I just put up is a very important ratio, important formula for calculation purposes in our exam. Return on capital is equivalent to asset turnover times profit margin. And every company you will realize, your own organization, all are concerned about increasing the ROC. The ROC is the money we have got from our investors. Both the lenders and our people have invested money. So we must give them a good return. To give them a good return, what have we got to do? We have to improve the ROC. How to improve the ROC? To improve the ROC, we must improve the asset turnover and we must improve the profit margin. So asset turnover means you must invest your money on good asset, useful asset. Profit margin means you must be focusing on your cost control. So if you want your company to flourish, you must be looking at the two ratios, asset turnover and profit margin. Now when you are preparing the budgets, that is what you must prepare the budget in such a way that you will be focusing on cost control and you will be focusing on asset turnover. That is, remember we were discussing something called investment centers. Most of the organizations are managed on an investment center basis. So on an investment center, they must have this asset turnover and the profit margin all the time focused. That is what we should be looking all the time. So this is what I say. The three profitability ratios are
Profitability.
Yeah, profitability, profit margin, liquidity, and finally arising from that is ROC. ROC has nothing to do with the liquidity, but ROC has all to do with the profit margin and asset turnover. So when you are preparing budgets, this is what you should be focusing. You must focus on asset turnover, you must focus on operating margin, and also you must focus on your liquidity. That's a good budget. That's our good budget. So you can see the government Sri Lanka budget, we are having problems because we have not done good on our liquidity. So we are having problems, we can't pay our loans, and Prime Minister is every day crying saying that we can't pay the loans. Why? Poor budgeting. They did not focus on liquidity. They were looking at all the development and asset turnovers and all that, but they did not focus on liquidity. So behavioral aspect of the budgeting. budget is not something people like. You know, people don't like budgets. It's a big problem for them. It looks as something like a constraint on what they want to do. Budget. So basically, it is believed if the budget is prepared with their participation, the budget will be somewhat more realistic, more workable, rather than the finance or the some head preparing a budget and passing it to the people for implementation. So when you take the participatory approach, the quality of the budget will be much more better because the people at the lower level knows very much about what is happening at the lower level, at the ground level, than the people who sit and wait in the air-conditioned room. So they know whether these shops are open, whether these shops are doing well, closed or anything, if you are preparing a sales budget. They know the people who are working with you, whether he is a good capable worker, not all that. So must do it's good to do the budget with the participation. There are two ways to do the budget. One is what we call imposed budget. The budget is prepared by the top and it is sent. This is your budget. This year you implement it. This is what most of the people do. But that kind of a thing don't allow people to participate. The other one, the more modern method is to get the participatory budget. But the problem with the participatory budget, sometimes, you know, too many cooks spoil the soup. By getting all the people to come and sit at the budget meeting, they will talk all sorts of crazy things, and the one mad fellow in the budget table can drive all the other fellows also mad, and there can be lot of issues. Imposed budget is a very simple one. One person or set of people will sit together and prepare the budget, less time consuming, because sometimes the managers of the, when you try to get this participatory budget, some don't have the skills of preparing the budget and they will just come and waste the time. And generally the senior managers, if you look at the government budget, the finance minister and the prime minister knows the overall situation of the country economy, rather than getting all the ministers to sit and prepare a budget. Good way is for them to prepare the budget and just before the parliament being presented, inform them at the cabinet meeting. So in the present government, the president, the prime minister, the finance minister and few people get together and prepare the budget. If you get all the cabinet ministers, 60 fellows to sit on the budget table, no budget will be prepared because they will be talking all sorts of things. So they know the amount of money available, amount of loans to be paid. So they have an overview of the organizations. Companies also same story. Companies, if you go to the lower levels to prepare the budget, they will say, we want a car, we want a computer, we want 100 people more, all that. But at the top level, we know we can't do all that because we want to make a profit. So we can't give all the people cars, we can't do this, that and the other. So we have to, so we are in a better position at the level, see overview and generally the long term, the senior managers will look at long term. At the junior level, they will look at short term. So these are some of the issues we may have. And when you prepare budgets, have you heard this term called budget slacks? Slacks. What is budget slack?
That is the gap between.
Not the gap.
When we.
Yeah, not the gap. It is something like this. Now I tell you, Dhanusha, can you give me your budget for sales? You know easily you can do 100,000. But without giving 100,000, you give me a budget for 90,000. So you build up a slack. So you know you can easily achieve that one. So when you ask the people to prepare the budgets, they will always put up a slack into the budget. Expenditures are same story. When you know you can manage with 100,000, you will ask for 110,000. And you know, you try to sort of be smart by trying to put up a slack into the budget. So when you go for the participatory budget, this is one of the biggest problems we have. They will want their budget to be very easily achievable. And for that purpose, they will try to build up slacks. to make the budget more comfortable. Expenditure, they will try to increase it. Income, they will try to reduce it. I was working in a company. I saw some sales reps, they can do big sales for a month. They can do 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, 1 million sales. But they prepare the budget for about 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs. And by the 20th or 21st of the month, they have achieved the sale. And I can see them in office. So when I ask them why are they in office, they say, sir, we have achieved the budget. So I said, why? No, we have already achieved the budget, because they have prepared the budget with a slack. So they can just, next 10 days, they don't need to go to the field. They can just stay in the office, watch some cricket matches, all that kind of a thing. But if you prepare the budget, then what I did was I prepared the budget for them. I gave them a very challenging target. I said, no. This is not good. 700,000 is not good for you. You can do 1 million. So he had to work very hard. So this is the problem with the budget. Impossible thing comes, you can remove the slacks. And also when the budgets are prepared by outsiders, when I mean by outsiders, your budget for the HR department is prepared by the finance division. They are very objective, because sometimes when you have to prepare the budget for your own HR department, you have something called human empathy coming up. She's useless, but still you want to keep it. But finance division fellows, they don't know who so-and-so is. They will say so-and-so is not necessary. So-and-so has not performed. So that way, the budgets becomes more objective when you. So surely there are a lot of advantages of participatory budgets. The morale, when you get all the people to prepare the budget, they feel they are part of the budget process. So the morale is very high. And they feel that their opinion is taken and listened, which will make them more they feel very valuable. They take ownership for the budget. Now they can't say it was prepared by the finance director. They know it is their own budget they have prepared, so they must try to achieve it. In lower level people, as I said, they have a good detailed knowledge, and that will help. So looking at behavioral aspects, to budget to be something workable, it must be motivating, and it must be also providing some kind of a incentive to work on. If this is not done, the people will become very cautious. People will become very conservative. This is one of the biggest problems we have in the companies. People don't want to do anything big because, they want to be very cautious. They don't want to take any risk and do something new. So managers must be motivated. Managers must be driven to do something new all the time. Take a little bit of a risk. And if they find that all the time adverse variances are investigated, criticized, but whenever they achieve favorable variance, nothing is mentioned, they will get very demotivated. And also we have a problem. You remember we were discussing this in the responsibility centers earlier. The controllable and uncontrollable. You give a budget to me and you put a rent figure of 100,000 which is imposed on me. I have no option. So, and asking me to account for that is not really good. That is going to demotivate me, because I have no control over that expenditure. And also, the budget must be something with goal congruence. It must have something to drive the personal objectives of the people as well as the objectives of the company. So I remember I worked out in a company. I prepared the budgets, or got them to prepare the budgets, and I said, if you save 10% of the budget, of that 10% saving, I will give you 25% to your department as a special bonus. So that was an incentive for people to go and save something somehow. When they save, I gave them, of the savings, let's say they save 100,000, I give them 25% of that as a bonus for their department, for them to do whatever. So maybe an annual trip, maybe a trip to foreign country or something like that. Most of the people think the budget, particularly our government ministers and some of the government departments, think budget as a pot of cash that is there to spend. Yesterday I told you in our church, I saw most of the people who did not have even eye problems and all that, they had just gone and spent the budget because they knew 31st March was coming. They want to spend their medical expenditure budget and they have just gone and got their eyes tested, spending 10,000, 15,000, all that, because they thought the budget must be spent and finished. So they think it's a part of cash. So in the 11th month, when they know there's a balance, they will ask what is the balance and they want to spend it on curtains, carpets, all sorts of things they will spend it. Budget should be normally done with negotiation. So whether it's participatory or imposing, it does not matter so long as you negotiate, increase the results, and ideally it must be initiated by the department manager and then through a negotiation correct it. The budget, say, hey, you can do better than this. Why are you putting 100,000 sales when you can do 120? Agree. Why are you putting 75,000 expenditure when you can do it at 65? Agree. So negotiate and agree. That's the best way to get through the budget. So this is what, otherwise what happens is what we said as we call budget slacks or budget padding will come in when you don't properly negotiate the budgets. They might exaggerate cost, they might underestimate the revenue. Budget basically works as a constraint to the management. That is why sometimes we have something called beyond the budget. Because the people will look at the budget and say, we have achieved the budget, let's not go beyond this one. So they take a very conservative approach. Even when they see a new customer coming up, they will not want to sell because they say we have achieved our target. We have achieved our budget. See, you might be witnessing this in your insurance company. The moment they achieve their target, they say we have achieved, not necessary. Let's forget about that customer because we have achieved our target. That kind of a thing. So immediate impact of a new business is to raise capital and operating costs. So the benefits will come in the long term. So these are some of the problems. Immediately your costs are going up when you buy asset. The people will be concerned about that one, even though the benefits will come in the long term. Managers will sit in office and will prepare budgets, read the budget without going to the field and doing sales or purchasing. I had this problem. I was working in a company. I see all my sales managers, every fellow, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, inside the company. I asked them, why are you not going to the field? No, sir, we are preparing the budget. So they are preparing the budgets without doing work. This can be very, very harmful, which can be very dangerous to the company. So they may not take lot of risk. And generally the budget can offer certain benefits, but when it is enforced very rigidly or very in an insensitive manner, it may be a negative kind of a tool for many of us. So I think I'm almost coming to the end of the budget now. Yeah, I can just finish it. I can just finish that. I only one more slide. I can just finish it. Yeah. So budgets should be something that should be motivating the people all the time. So budget should not be very loose also. Sometimes budgets are very loose, people can easily achieve it, then it's not a very great budget. Budget should not be very tight also. Then it becomes a very inachievable budget. People will not be serious about the budget. Budget must be something challenging, little bit stretching. It must be something which people will have to do something extraordinary, but not something impossible. I remember I was working in a company. At the beginning of January 1st, our managing director used to call us and give us a big target sheet. And he says, if you achieve this thing, Kumar, you are going to end up with a 3 million bonus, 5 million bonus. But we know none of those targets are achievable. So moment we come out of that room, we destroy that paper because we know it's totally a useless paper. It's not something which we can achieve. Even though he's thinking of giving 5 million bonus, we know we can never achieve it. So budgets must be somewhat tight, somewhat challenging, and somewhat should be motivational. If you try to be too tight, it's not going to help. So these are the few things we have learned on the budget. Next topic we are going to look at is the budgetary control. That's the next topic. That's not a big topic, but we should be able to finish up that one. So how is your calendar, Danusha, for this month, this week?
This week I'm okay with any day, sir.
So today is Tuesday. Thursday, how are you at say 10 to 11?
Thursday is fine.
Shall we do Thursday?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So we'll do Thursday same time 10 to 11, okay? So I'll see you on Thursday then.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care.